Our ancestors who endured frontier winters possessed a knowledge we've long forgotten. They knew how to transform a desolate, freezing shelter into a warm haven when the temperature plummeted to 40 degrees below. These pioneers mastered techniques to keep a fire going for 12 hours straight without any modern technology. They crafted ingenious insulation using nothing more than moss, mud, and animal hair, systems that were just as effective as anything we use today. And when the worst happened, when the fire went out, when supplies ran low, and when blizzards sealed them inside for weeks, they had emergency plans that were the difference between life and death. In our world of smart thermostats, electric blankets, and instant weather updates, we've lost touch with what it truly meant to survive a single winter night, where a mistake could lead to death before sunrise. How did these families manage? What incredible engineering did they conjure from simple logs and stone? And why have we lost so much of this vital knowledge about the survival systems that saved our forebears? Quick note before we begin. If you're a regular listener, please hit that like or subscribe button. I'm always curious to know who's out there, so drop a comment with your city in the current time. All right. Settle in. Get comfortable. But just your blankets and pillows, because we're traveling to Montana, 1880, and you'll want to be cozy for this. The first thing you feel is the brutal cold, a sharp slap to the face that jolts you awake. Your eyes open in the pre-dawn gloom of a Montana winter morning in 1883. Outside, the temperature has dropped to 30 degrees below zero, and inside the cabin, it's not much better. Your nose and cheeks burn from the frigid air, while the rest of you is buried under a mound of quilts, furs, and anything the Morrison family could pile onto the beds. Beside you, your younger siblings are still asleep, their breath creating small clouds that hang in the icy air. The fire from the night before has dwindled to a handful of glowing embers, barely visible in the cast iron stove. These embers are precious. If they've gone out completely, the family is in grave danger. This isn't like your own warm bed where a furnace failure means an uncomfortable night and a call to a repairman. For the Morrisons and countless other frontier families, a dead fire on a Montana winter night could mean death by morning. Thomas Morrison, your father, is already up. You hear the soft creak of his bed as he rises, followed by the quiet thud of his feet on the plank floor, boards that feel like blocks of ice. He doesn't bother with getting dressed, as he slept in most of his clothes. He moves toward the stove with a practiced urgency, hunched against the cold. "Sarah," he whispers to your mother, "I need some light." You can just make out her shape as she reaches for the bedside table where a candle and matches are waiting. The scratch of the match is loud in the silent cabin. For a moment, the tiny flame illuminates her face, which is etched with fatigue and determination, with traces of frost on her eyelashes. "Bitter cold," your father mutters, carefully opening the stove door. The metal hinges make a cracking sound, which is not an annoyance but a reassuring sign that the stove hasn't cracked in the extreme temperatures. A broken stove would be a disaster. He squints, examining the embers. The entire family is holding its breath. The day's survival hinges on what he finds in that firebox. "Still some life here," he says, a hint of relief in his voice. "Hand me the kindling box. What you are witnessing is not just a casual morning fire. It's the execution of an intricate thermal survival system, honed by frontier families through brutal trial and error. Every move your father makes follows a precise sequence passed down through generations. First, he takes small, bone-dry splinters of pine kindling that were prepared weeks ago and kept close to the stove. He doesn't just toss them in, he builds a careful structure over the coals, ensuring airflow and direct contact between the smallest pieces and the embers. This is the last of the kindling, he says. John, we'll need to cut more today. That's you. At 12 years old, you're old enough to assist with the crucial task of fire management. You nod, although he can't see you in the dark. The kindling must be perfect. If it's too thick, it won't ignite. If it's too thin, it'll burn up before the larger pieces catch. Your father leans in close, gently blowing on the coals. It's not a hard puff, but a long, steady breath that gives the embers just enough oxygen to revive them. It's a skill he's spent years perfecting. The technique works. A small flame flickers, tentatively licking at the kindling. He adds slightly larger pieces now, arranging them to form a miniature log cabin that maximizes airflow. The fire begins to grow. Emma, check the water bucket, your mother says to your older sister. Emma reluctantly slides from under the covers, wrapping a shawl around her nightgown. She goes to the corner where a bucket sits on a small table and reaches in. Frozen solid, she reports, tapping the ice that goes all the way through. Your mother sighs. We'll have to melt snow again. She gets up too, her bed creaking as she moves. The younger children, your two little brothers and baby sister, remain bundled together, sharing their body heat. At ages 6, 4, and 2, they will stay in bed as long as possible this morning. Thomas, how's the temperature? Your mother asks, pulling a woolen dress over her nightgown. Layers are survival. Your father doesn't need a thermometer. Decades on the frontier have turned his body into a precise instrument. Must have hit 40 below last night, he says. Coldest yet this winter. Colder than last February? She asks, referring to a particularly harsh cold snap that froze their water barrel and killed the neighbor's cow. Not quite that bad, he replies, but it's only January. The worst is still to come. He's building the fire now, adding slightly bigger sticks and waiting patiently between each one. Adding too much wood too quickly would smother the fragile flames. This daily ritual isn't just about comfort, it's about life and death. The ability to bring a fire back from nearly dead embers is more valuable than gold on the frontier. John, time to get up, your mother calls to you. We need water for breakfast. You reluctantly slide from under the warm quilts. The cold air hits you like a punch. Your fingers are stiff and barely able to grip the clothes you reach for. You dress quickly, adding a second pair of wool socks that your mother knitted last fall from the family's own sheep's wool. Outside, the pre-dawn world is both breathtakingly beautiful and lethal. The stars are impossibly bright in the black sky, and the snow reflects enough light that you can see the way to the shed. Your breath instantly freezes, forming ice crystals on your scarf. You pull it tighter around your face, leaving only your eyes exposed. The shed door has frozen shut. You have to shoulder it 3 times before the ice cracks and the door swings open. Inside, you grab the snow shovel, a crude wooden scoop with metal banding your father made last winter, and head for the cleanest patch of snow. You've been taught to never collect snow from near the cabin or outbuildings, where it might be contaminated. You move toward the edge of the clearing, where the snow is pristine. The snow squeaks under your boots, and it's so light and dry that it barely holds together when scooped. This type of snow yields less water, so you know to fill the bucket extra full. The morning air burns your lungs with every breath, and your fingers, despite the mittens, begin to ache with cold. You work quickly, filling the wooden bucket and packing it down until it's heaped high. By the time you return to the cabin, the fire has begun to warm the space near the stove. Your father has now added the first small logs, carefully arranging them to create a coal bed that will last. The stove's metal sides begin to ping and creak as they heat up. "Good job," your mother says, taking the snow bucket. She places it near the stove, but not so close that the steam could cause the cast iron to crack. "Now, help your father with the bigger logs while I get breakfast started." Your father is already at the wood pile inside the cabin, a precisely stacked arrangement of split logs organized by size and wood type. This indoor supply is the result of months of preparation, trees felled in spring, seasoned through summer and fall, and brought inside for winter. "We need oak for the main morning fire," he explains, though you already know this. "Pine burns too fast. Good for starting, but not for lasting. Hickory is best for overnight, but we'll use that later. Oak gives us the steady heat we need. The oak logs are thick and heavy." Your father selects 3, each about forearm length and as thick as your wrist. He's not choosing them at random. He considers their shape, the grain, and even their weight, which tells him about their moisture content. "Remember, John," he says, handing you a log. "We're not just building a fire. We're creating a heat system that has to work perfectly every time. There's no room for error. A poorly built fire might burn through precious wood too quickly or, worse, go out, allowing the cabin to freeze. By late afternoon, it would be uninhabitable." Emma has set up the small folding table near the stove and is helping your mother prepare breakfast. The menu rarely changes in winter: cornmeal mush, perhaps with a bit of molasses, and coffee for the adults. Salt pork or bacon might appear on special days, but meat is carefully rationed during the coldest months. The younger children are awake now, still in bed but sitting up, waiting for the cabin to warm. Little Michael, the 4-year-old, has his hand wrapped in the fur of the family dog, Buck, who sleeps with the children to provide extra warmth. "Mama, it's so cold my teeth hurt," 6-year-old William complains. "Stay under the covers a bit longer," your mother replies. "It'll warm up soon enough." The baby, Catherine, doesn't complain. At 2, she has already adapted to the rhythm of frontier winters, burrowing deeper into the bedding until only her eyes are visible. Your father returns to the stove with the oak logs. He opens the door carefully, examines the fire, then places the first log precisely where it will catch best without disturbing the existing flames. The fire hisses and pops as the new wood begins to heat. "Perfect," he murmurs to himself. He closes the stove door and adjusts the damper, a critical component that controls airflow and the burning rate. Too open, and the fire burns too fast. Too closed, and it could smolder and produce dangerous smoke. Your mother has placed a cast iron pot on top of the stove filled with the snow you collected. It's already melting. Next to it sit a coffee pot and a larger pot for the cornmeal mush. Nothing is wasted. The same fire that heats the cabin also cooks the food and melts snow for all water needs. "John, check the windows," your father instructs. "Make sure the coverings are secure." Each window has been prepared with multiple layers of protection. Rags are stuffed into any gaps. Oiled paper covers the glass to let in some light while reducing heat loss, and heavy quilts hang over everything to trap the warmth inside. You go to each window, ensuring the quilts are properly hung and the rags haven't fallen out. At the east-facing window, you pull the quilt aside to peer out. The first hint of dawn appears, a faint lightening of the black sky. "Sun's coming," you report. "Good," your father says. "We've got firewood to cut today, and I'd rather not do it in the dark." The fire is really taking hold now. The stove surface is hot, and the snow in the pot is melting quickly. Your mother stirs the cornmeal, creating the mush that will provide the calories needed for work in the cold. The cabin, so frigid just 30 minutes ago, is beginning to warm, at least within a 6-foot radius of the stove. The temperature difference is dramatic. You can see the boundary where the warm air meets the cold, like a shimmering, invisible wall. Your mother notices too. "Emma, bring Catherine over to the warm side," she says. "Mind her feet stay covered." Emma retrieves the toddler, keeping her wrapped in a small quilt, and brings her near the stove. The little girl's face, pinched with cold, relaxes as she feels the warmth. "Thomas, don't forget we're low on lamp oil," your mother says. "If this cold spell lasts, we'll be in darkness by next week." Your father nods grimly. "I know. I'm hoping to get to town before the next storm, but that sky looks threatening." This is the reality of winter survival, a constant calculation of supplies, weather, and needs. Every decision carries weight. Go to town for supplies and risk getting caught in a storm? Or stay home and risk running out? Cut more firewood today or repair the loose chinking in the north wall? Each choice could have life or death consequences. The cabin has now reached what passes for warm on a Montana winter morning, perhaps 45 degrees near the stove, but still freezing near the walls. The frost on the inside of the walls hasn't melted, it just glistens in the firelight. "Breakfast," your mother announces. The family gathers around the small table, except for your father, who takes his bowl to the door. "I need to check the animals," he says, pulling on his heavy coat, a fur-lined canvas garment that reaches to his knees. It's too cold for them to be in the lean-to. Your mother protests. Bring the chickens inside. The cow, too, if you have to. He shakes his head. The cow's too big for the cabin door. But I've got her well wrapped in the barn. I banked extra hay against the walls last night. The chickens might have to come in, though. With that, he opens the door, letting in a blast of Arctic air that cuts through the cabin's hard-won warmth. He closes it quickly behind him. The rest of you eat quickly, the hot cornmeal warming you from the inside. There's no talking during meals in winter. It wastes both heat and time. Every calorie counts. Every moment of exposure to the cold requires energy the body needs for survival. John, when you're done, help me prepare the heated stones, your mother says between bites. The heated stones are another crucial part of the frontier thermal management system. Fist-sized rocks from the creek bed are kept near the stove all day, absorbing heat. At night, they are wrapped in rags and placed in the beds to provide hours of gentle warmth. You select 4 stones from beside the stove, using a rag to protect your hands from their heat. They are almost too hot to handle, which is perfect. They will stay warm until midday if wrapped correctly. Your mother expertly bundles each stone in several layers of cloth. First, a thin cotton rag, then wool scraps for insulation, and finally, a piece of old blanket to hold it all together. She secures each bundle with twine. Put these in the children's beds, she instructs, one at the foot of each bed under the quilts, but not touching their skin directly. You place the heated stones as directed, carefully tucking them under the covers. Within minutes, the bedding will capture their warmth, creating pockets of heat that will last for hours. The door opens again, and your father returns, carrying a wooden crate of chickens. The birds are unusually quiet, subdued by the cold. It's bad out there, he reports, setting the crate in the corner farthest from the beds. The thermometer on the barn wall broke in the night. Glass shattered from the cold. Your mother looks up sharply. And the cow? She's alive but shivering badly. I gave her extra feed and stuffed more hay around her. I'll check again in an hour. He stamps his feet, knocking snow from his boots. The well's frozen solid. We'll be melting snow for at least a week, I reckon. This news is a heavy blow. Melting snow for all water needs, drinking, cooking, minimal washing, requires a significant amount of firewood. It's an added strain on already carefully managed resources. How's our wood supply looking? Your mother asks, though she knows the answer. We've got about 8 days' worth inside. Maybe another week's worth in the covered stack by the barn. He removes his coat, hanging it on a peg where the frost on its surface will melt near the stove's heat. We'll need to cut more today, no matter what. The reality of frontier winter survival becomes clear in this moment. There's no rest, no day off, and no break from the constant work of staying alive. Thank you for the additional information. I have carefully analyzed the second part of your script. A 20% change means rewriting about 640 words to give it a fresh feel while keeping the core narrative, tone, and emotional weight intact. Here is the rewritten version of the second part of your script. I have focused on rephrasing sentences, using different vocabulary, and altering the structure to make it distinct from the original. Each new day brought with it a list of critical, non-negotiable tasks. Your father now sat at the table, quickly finishing his cornmeal mush, which had already grown cold during his brief time outside. He didn't complain. Cold food was just another fact of winter life. John and I will head out to cut wood as soon as it's fully light, he said between bites. Emma can help with the barn chores today since it's too cold for the little ones. At 15, Emma was old enough to handle adult responsibilities. She nodded, though I'll also need to repack the snow banked against the north wall, your father continued. It's drifted away, and I can feel a draft. The snowbank was another brilliant piece of frontier engineering. Piling snow against the cabin walls created a crucial windbreak and added insulation, but it required constant upkeep, especially after a windy night. What about the ice on the roof? Your mother asked. Is it building up near the chimney again? Your father nodded grimly. I'll have to clear it before we go for wood. Can't risk it melting and damming up if we get a warm spell. Ice dams were a serious threat. If snow melted from the chimney's heat and then refroze at the edges of the roof, it could trap more water, forcing it under the shingles and into the cabin. A leak in the middle of winter could be catastrophic. Outside, the sky was lightening, the deep darkness giving way to a muted gray. With the sun's arrival, the temperature might rise a little, maybe to a balmy -20 degrees, making outdoor work slightly less lethal. Your father finished his breakfast and stood, mentally planning the day's tasks. John, get your warmest clothes on. We'll start with the roof ice, then check on the animals again, then head to the woodlot. You nodded, knowing what lay ahead, hours of backbreaking, freezing work that had to be done perfectly despite numbed fingers and the constant risk of frostbite. There was no room for complaint or weakness. Survival demanded everything. As you pulled on your second pair of wool socks, you glanced at the window. The oiled paper glowed with the first true light of dawn, revealing the intricate frost patterns on its surface, beautiful, crystalline structures that were as deadly as they were delicate. At least it's not snowing, you thought, trying to find a positive note. Your father seemed to read your mind. Storm's coming, though, he said, looking at the same window. I can feel it in my bones. We've got maybe 6 hours before it hits. 6 hours to cut enough wood to survive what could be days of a blizzard. 6 hours to secure animals, check the cabin's defenses, and prepare for the worst. Just another day on the Montana frontier, where every sunrise was a victory and every successfully managed fire was the difference between life and death. A small part of you wondered how many more winters your family could endure this way, how many more mornings of frozen water and desperate fire starting. But there was no time for such thoughts. The fire was burning. The cabin was warming. And there was work to be done. Survival work. The kind our ancestors mastered and we have long since forgotten. In your warm modern bed, you should be grateful for a thermostat set to 68 degrees, a miracle beyond a pioneer's imagination. You stepped out behind your father, and the cold stole your breath. It wasn't the kind of cold that just made you shiver, it was the kind that made you wonder how anything survived out here. The kind that made your nostril hairs brittle and your eyelashes freeze together if you blinked too long. "Keep moving," your father said, his voice muffled by his scarf. "Standing still is how you die out here." The sun was just rising over the eastern hills, casting long, blue shadows across the snow. Despite the sunlight, the temperature was still well below zero, a fact confirmed by the high-pitched squeak of the snow under your boots, a sound that only happened in the deepest cold. Your father handed you a wooden snow rake, a homemade tool with a long handle and a flat blade. "Start on the south corner while I check the chimney," he instructed. You began scraping at the roof's edge, where dangerous ice dams had formed. It was backbreaking work, reaching up to pull down the accumulated snow and ice. Within minutes, your fingers began to ache despite 2 pairs of mittens. On the other side of the cabin, your father had climbed a stack of firewood to reach the roof near the chimney. He was breaking away ice with a metal tool, sending shards crashing to the ground. "Damn near blocked," he called over. Another day and we'd have had smoke backing up inside. This was no exaggeration. A blocked chimney was potentially fatal, as smoke filling the cabin could suffocate the family or force them into the killing cold. As you worked, your mind drifted to the day's main task, cutting firewood. Without a steady supply of properly prepared wood, the family's sophisticated heating system would fail. And without heat, winter would win. The Morrison family, like all frontier survivors, had elevated firewood preparation to a science. It wasn't just about chopping trees. It was about choosing the right species, cutting at the right time of year, seasoning for the optimal duration, and processing the wood into specific sizes for different heating needs. By the time you finished your section of the roof, your father had already moved to the cabin's north wall, shoveling fresh snow against the base. You joined him without being asked. Everyone worked without prompting in winter. There was no room for laziness when survival was on the line. "Pack it tight," he instructed, showing you how to compress the snow into a solid bank against the wall. "We want it dense enough to block the wind, not just lying loose." This snowbank was ingenious in its simplicity, a free insulation system that could add significant warmth to the interior. Your mother and siblings were depending on these snowbanks to keep the cabin temperature survivable. With the urgent roof and wall work complete, your father led you toward the barn. It was a crude structure, smaller than the cabin, but vital for sheltering the livestock. Inside, the family milk cow shivered despite being wrapped in old blankets and surrounded by hay. "She's not doing well," your father said grimly, running his hand along her bony flank. "Another night this cold might finish her." The cow represented one of the family's most valuable possessions, a source of milk, butter, and future calves. Losing her would be catastrophic, the modern equivalent of losing thousands of dollars. "We'll bring her inside tonight," he decided. "We'll put her in the corner by the woodpile." This was an extreme measure. The cabin was already cramped with 9 people. Adding a 1,000-pound cow meant even less space and more mess, but losing the animal was unthinkable. "What about the chickens?" you asked, nodding toward the stall where a dozen hens huddled together. "They'll stay inside until this cold snap breaks. Your mother won't be happy about the mess, but we can't risk losing them." The winter economy of survival was clear in these decisions. Every animal, every cord of wood, every morsel of food was a carefully managed resource that stood between the family and starvation or freezing. With the immediate morning tasks done, your father turned to the real work of the day. "Get the saws and axes," he said. "We'll take the sled to the woodlot." The woodlot was about a quarter-mile from the cabin. Most of the trees right around the homestead had been cleared years ago, so trips for firewood had to be farther and farther. You retrieved the tools from the lean-to, two two-man saws, 3 axes of different sizes, and iron-splitting wedges. Each tool was meticulously cared for, blades kept sharp, handles rubbed with oil to prevent cracking. "John. Thomas. Wait a moment," your mother called from the cabin door. She hurried toward you, wrapped in a shawl, the cold air swirling around her. She held something in her hands. "Take these." She had brought 2 pairs of extra wool socks. "Put these over your mittens," she instructed. "It's too cold for just leather and wool today." This layering technique provided crucial additional protection for extremities most vulnerable to frostbite. "And take this," she added, handing over a small tin. Inside was a mixture of bear grease and beeswax for your faces. "Don't want your skin cracking open." You and your father dutifully smeared the strong-smelling substance over your exposed skin. It was greasy and unpleasant but created a barrier against the brutal cold and wind. "We'll be back before sunset," your father promised. "Keep the fire steady." Your mother nodded, understanding the subtext of his words. If they weren't back by dark, something had gone very wrong, and she would have to make difficult decisions about managing the fire with the limited indoor wood supply. The wooden sled waited beside the barn. It was a sturdy, homemade construction with curved oak runners designed to haul heavy loads across the snow. Your father harnessed himself to the sled with leather straps crossed over his shoulders. You would help pull once the sled was loaded. For now, you walked alongside, carrying the smaller tools. The trip to the woodlot was silent, both of you conserving energy and minimizing exposure. Your breath froze instantly, creating ice in your scarf and around your hat. The forest, when you reached it, felt almost warm compared to the open areas. The trees blocked the wind, creating a stillness that offered slight relief. Your father stopped, surveying the available trees with an expert eye. "We need a mix today," he said, his words forming thick clouds in the air. "Oak for steady heat, hickory for overnight, and some pine for quick morning fires." He wasn't randomly selecting trees. He walked from one to another, sometimes knocking against the trunks. "This oak's been dead about 2 years," he said, pointing to a medium-sized tree with no bark on its lower trunk. "That's perfect. Already partially seasoned, but still sound." This was frontier forestry knowledge, passed down through generations. A living tree was too moist to burn efficiently. A tree dead too long became rotten. but a tree dead for 1 to 3 years was ideal. "We'll take this one first," he decided, positioning himself on one side of the tree. "Get on the other end of the saw." The two-man crosscut saw was a marvel of engineering, a flexible steel blade with specially designed teeth that cut in both directions. You took your position opposite your father, gripping the wooden handle. "Remember," he said, "let the saw do the work. Don't force it or you'll bind the blade." Long, steady strokes. This was a skill where precision mattered more than strength. A properly used saw could cut efficiently even in the hands of a 12-year-old boy. Poor technique could exhaust even the strongest man and risk damaging expensive tools that couldn't be easily replaced. You began the rhythmic work, pulling and pushing the saw through the frozen wood. Despite the bitter cold, you soon warmed from the exertion, with steam rising from your bodies. Your grandfather could cut a cord a day by himself, your father said during a brief pause. Even in his 60s, he outworked men half his age. "How'd he do that?" you asked. "He understood wood," came the simple reply. "Knew which trees to take, how to fell them to save work, how to split along the grain instead of fighting it." He said, "A smart man does half the work of a strong, foolish one." This was more than a story, it was a lesson in frontier efficiency. When every calorie was precious and every hour of daylight was critical, working smart was as important as working hard. The tree began to groan as you neared the end of the cut. "Careful now," your father warned. "It's starting to lean. Step back when I tell you." Felling trees was one of the most dangerous tasks. A miscalculation could mean being crushed by hundreds of pounds of falling timber, with no doctor for 50 miles and temperatures that would ensure death before help could arrive. "Back," he shouted as the tree made a sharp cracking sound. You both stepped away quickly, moving perpendicular to the fall line. The massive oak seemed to hesitate for a moment, then surrendered to gravity, crashing through smaller branches on its way down. The impact sent a shudder through the frozen forest floor. "Good," your father said with satisfaction. "Fell clean. No hanging branches." Now the real labor began, transforming this giant tree into precisely sized pieces of firewood. The trunk had to be cut into sections, those sections split into manageable pieces, and all of it loaded onto the sled and hauled back to the homestead. "Let's bucket into stove lengths," your father said, referring to the process of cutting the trunk into 18-inch segments, the ideal size for the cabin's stove. This was another example of the precision required for survival. Wood that was too long wouldn't fit in the stove, wood that was too short would burn too quickly. As you worked, your father explained why different woods served different purposes. Pine burns hot and fast, good for starting fires or quick heat, he said between strokes, but it burns too quickly for overnight and forms creosote in the chimney. "What's creosote?" you asked, though you'd heard the explanation before. "It's that black, tarry stuff that builds up inside the chimney. If we only burn pine, we'd have to clean the chimney every 2 weeks or risk a fire that could burn down the whole cabin." This knowledge was life-or-death information. "Oak," he continued, "burns slower, makes good coals that last, and hickory is the best for overnight. Dense. Burns slow and hot. A good hickory log can hold coals until morning if you bank it right. Banking was the technique of arranging logs and controlling airflow to maintain a slow, steady burn through the night, another critical skill. The conversation paused as you finished a section. Your father set aside the saw and picked up an axe. "Now for splitting," he said. "Watch how I place the wedge." Split would burn more efficiently than round logs. But splitting required understanding how a grain worked. Your father studied the oak round, identified natural checks in the wood, and positioned an iron wedge along one of these lines. He struck it with the back of his axe. The frozen wood resisted, but after 3 strikes, a crack appeared. "See that?" he said, pointing to the split. "Always work with the grain, not against it. Wood wants to split a certain way. Fight it, and you'll work twice as hard." He inserted a second wedge, pounded it deeper, and the round separated into 2 halves. Those halves would be split again and again until they were the right size for the stove. You joined the splitting work, learning through practice where to place the wedges. It was exhausting work, made harder by the cold. After 2 hours, you had processed about a quarter of the fallen oak. Your father straightened, rubbing his lower back. "We need to pace ourselves," he said. "Still got at least 4 more hours of work, and we need to get back before the storm." He pulled a cloth bundle from his coat, a few pieces of cold cornbread and strips of dried venison. You ate quickly, sitting on the trunk. Despite the brutal temperature, you were warm from the exertion. "Should we get some pine, too?" you asked. Your father nodded. "After we finish this oak, we'll fell one good pine, then see about a hickory if there's time." As you resumed work, your father shifted into teaching mode. "The fire is like a living thing," he explained. "It needs the right food at the right time, needs to breathe, needs watching." He described how the cabin's heating system worked as an integrated whole, the stove with its dampers, the chimney drawing away smoke while minimizing heat loss, the strategic placement of water containers to humidify the air. "Your mother knows exactly where to put the baby's cradle," he said. "Not too close to the stove where it's too hot, not too close to the walls where it's too cold. There's a spot where the temperature stays just right, and she can find it without thinking." This was the frontier equivalent of modern climate control, a sophisticated understanding of heat dynamics achieved without technology. By mid-morning, you had processed the entire oak tree and stacked the firewood on the sled. Your father selected a dead pine next. Pine was easier to split than oak, and the work went quickly. "Storm's coming faster than I thought," your father said suddenly, looking up at the sky. The clear blue had given way to a flat gray, and the wind was picking up. "We'll skip the hickory," he decided. "What we've got we'll have to do. Let's get this loaded and head back." You helped stack the wood on the sled, creating a 4-foot-high pile secured with rope. "That's about half a cord," your father estimated. "Should last us 4 days if we're careful." Both of you harnessed yourselves to the sled. The weight was substantial, but the runners slid easily over the packed snow. The return journey was much slower. The sled required constant attention to prevent it from sliding sideways or digging into soft spots. By the time the cabin came into view, the wind was driving fine snow particles that stung any exposed skin. "Just in time," your father said, nodding toward the western sky, which had darkened to an ominous purple-gray. "Blizzard within the hour, I'd wager. Your mother met you at the cabin door." Relief was evident on her face. "I was getting worried," she said, helping to unfasten the harness straps. "Storm's coming fast." "How's the fire?" your father asked immediately. "Burning steady. Emma's been tending it just like you showed her." Inside, the cabin had reached a comfortable warmth, perhaps 50 degrees near the stove, but still cold enough to see her breath near the walls. Emma stood by the stove, carefully adjusting a log. At 15, she was fully capable of managing the critical fire. "Good work," your father told her, inspecting the firebox. "The coal bed's perfect." This was high praise. Emma beamed with pride despite her exhaustion. "We need to get this wood stacked before the storm hits," your father said, turning toward the door. "John, you stack inside." The next half hour was a flurry of activity as the precious firewood was transferred from the sled to the indoor stack. Each piece was brushed clean of snow or ice. The indoor woodpile grew steadily against the wall, arranged by type and size, with the driest pieces kept for easy access. "That's the last of it," your father announced, handing through the final armload as the wind reached a howl. He stepped inside quickly, closing the door against the swirling snow. "Storm's here." The family had accomplished the essential task just in time, securing enough firewood to survive what might be a multi-day blizzard. It wasn't just luck or hard work, it was the application of generations of knowledge about forests, tools, and weather prediction. Your father moved to the stove, opened the door, and checked the fire. The interior glowed orange-red with a perfect bed of coals. He adjusted the damper, slowing the burn rate. "Now we can ride out the storm," he said with satisfaction. "We've got heat, water, and food under our roof. That's all we need." Outside, the blizzard enveloped the homestead in a swirling white darkness. But inside, the Morrison family had created their own self-contained world of survival, a carefully engineered microclimate built around the central miracle of controlled fire. As you warmed your still-cold hands by the stove, you realized that what you had done today wasn't just work. It was sophisticated thermal engineering that kept frontier families alive through winters that would kill the unprepared within hours. The fire crackled, consuming the oak you helped harvest with an almost sentient hunger, transforming its stored summer energy into the heat that stood between your family and the deadly cold just beyond the walls. The blizzard raged, transforming the landscape into a howling void. Inside, your family gathered around the stove, listening to the wind scream through any gap it could find. "Sounds angry out there," Emma said, glancing nervously at the ceiling. Your father nodded. "A storm like this would kill a man in minutes." You could hear it testing the cabin's defenses, probing, pushing, seeking any weakness. When it found even the smallest gap, It announced its discovery with a high-pitched whine and a puff of snow particles that danced in the firelight. "Thomas, there's a leak by the north window again," your mother said, pointing to a thin line of snow on the sill. Your father frowned. "Thought I fixed that last month." He rose from his spot by the fire to examine the window. "The chinking's failed," he announced. The cold shrunk the clay and pulled it away from the logs. This wasn't just an annoyance, it was a serious breach in the cabin's thermal envelope. Every bit of heat that escaped meant more precious firewood consumed. "We'll need to remix a batch," he said, turning to your mother. "Sarah, do we still have some of that animal hair saved?" "A small bag in the storage chest," she confirmed. "Not much, though. We used most of it on the east wall last month." This exchange might seem strange, but you understood what they meant. "John," your father said, "fetch the clay pot from behind the stove, the one we've been keeping warm." You retrieved a small clay container that sat in the zone of secondary heat. Inside was a mixture of clay soil collected in summer and saved for winter repairs. Your mother opened a small leather pouch containing a jumbled mess of fur, hair, and wool fibers. Nothing was wasted. "Emma, bring me the ash bucket," your father instructed. The systems at work represented centuries of knowledge. What they were preparing was a specialized form of chinking. Basic chinking might just be mud, but experienced families created sophisticated mixtures that were more durable. The combination of clay, wood ash, and animal hair, which acted as a binding fiber, created a remarkably effective sealant. "Need to get the consistency right," your father muttered, mixing the components in a small wooden bowl. "Too wet, and it'll freeze before it sets. Too dry, and it won't stick." This knowledge was not written in books, it was passed through direct instruction and experience. "I'll hold the lantern," your mother offered. Extra light was needed for precise work. Your father applied the chinking mixture with expert hands, pressing it into the gap. His fingers, rough and cracked, smoothed the surface with practiced efficiency. "This should hold," he said, "at least until the temperature rises enough for a proper repair." The entire process took less than 15 minutes, but it was a critical maintenance task. In a modern home, a small draft might be a minor inconvenience. In a frontier cabin, it could be the difference between survival and death. Your father returned to his place by the stove, warming his hands. The howling of the wind seemed to intensify. "Remember the Andersons' place?" he asked, directing the question to your mother. "Winter of '78? She nodded grimly. "Poor construction. Walls might as well have been made of cheesecloth." "What happened to them?" Emma asked, leaning forward with curiosity. Your parents exchanged a look, silently debating how much to share. "I'm ready to help you with the final part of your script. A 20% change on this section means I will rewrite approximately 640 words, focusing on rephrasing, changing vocabulary, and adjusting sentence structure while preserving the powerful narrative and tone." Finally, your father spoke. "They didn't make it through February," he said simply. "Found them all huddled together in the corner. The fire had gone out days earlier from what we could tell. A heavy silence settled over the cabin, broken only by the crackling of the fire and the storm's relentless howl. The tragedy of the Anderson family, a stark reminder of what was at stake, served as a sober lesson. That's why I'm always fussing about proper chinking and insulation, your father continued after a moment. It's not just about comfort. It's life and death out here. Little Michael, who had been playing with wooden blocks, looked up with wide eyes. Are we going to freeze too, Papa? No, son, your father assured him firmly. Our cabin is strong and tight. Your mama and I made sure of that when we built it. This wasn't an empty boast. The Morrison cabin was the product of generations of frontier knowledge, techniques honed through brutal winter survival. Tell us about building the cabin again, William requested. Your father settled back, warming his hands. Well, we didn't just slap some logs together. That's for sure. What followed was not just a story, but a lesson in the construction techniques that had kept your family alive for 6 Montana winters. First thing we did, your father began, was choose the right trees. Straight pines, 16 to 18 inches thick with minimal taper. We cut them in early spring when the sap was beginning to run. Even the timing of the harvest was precisely calculated. Trees cut at the wrong time would contain too much moisture, leading to excessive shrinkage or insect infestation. We peeled the bark right away, he continued. Left them to season all summer, turning them so they dried evenly. Emma, who had heard the story countless times, chimed in, and you notched them with a special cut so they'd fit tight. Your father nodded with approval. That's right. A saddle notch on the bottom, a V-notch on top. It creates a joint that sheds water and doesn't collect moisture that could freeze and split the wood. This level of engineering detail in a seemingly simple log cabin demonstrated the hidden sophistication of frontier building techniques. But the real secret, he continued, was the double wall construction on the north and west sides. This was the innovation your father was most proud of. Standard cabins have single walls, but ours has a second, inner wall on the sides that take the worst weather. It creates a dead air space between the walls. Best insulation there is. The concept of using trapped air as an insulator was understood long before modern fiberglass. The 4-inch gap between the outer and inner walls was then filled with dried moss. Remember gathering all that moss, John? He asked you with a smile. Must have collected 100 bushels that summer. You did remember. It had seemed like pointless, endless work at the time. Only later did you understand its critical importance. And the chinking, your mother added, that was the real work. The initial chinking was perhaps the most labor-intensive part of construction. Every gap between logs was first stuffed with smaller material like moss or cloth scraps, then sealed with the clay and hair mixture. Took us nearly a month just to finish all the walls, your father recalled. Your mother's fingers were raw. Worth every blister, she replied simply, glancing at the sturdy walls that now protected her family. The conversation moved to other innovations that made the Morrison cabin exceptional. Your father described the roof construction, a layered system of split logs, birch bark, dried moss, and sod. The Norwegians up north taught me that technique, he explained. A sod roof keeps heat in during winter and cool in during summer, and the weight presses everything together, making it more airtight. 6-year-old William piped up, "But why is the floor so cold if the walls are warm?" Your father nodded, appreciating the perceptive question. "That's our weak point," he admitted. "The cold comes right up through the ground." That's why they had built the floor off the soil and stuffed the crawl space with pine boughs. The floor was still the coldest part, which is why the beds were built on platforms to elevate them at least 2 feet. "And remember the paper?" your mother asked. Your father chuckled. 3 years' worth of newspapers from back east. Best wallpaper there is. The interior walls were covered with layers of old newspapers pasted directly to the logs. This provided another layer of insulation, reduced drafts, reflected lamplight, and even offered some reading material. The Richardsons' place burned down because they didn't know to keep their newspapers away from the stovepipe, your father added soberly. This constant balancing act, between warmth and safety, defined frontier survival. Baby Catherine stirred in her mother's arms. "She's too warm now," your mother said. The repair worked. The north corner's heating up. This casual observation revealed her intimate knowledge of the temperature variations inside the cabin. "Should bank the fire a bit," your father suggested. "Don't want to overheat and waste wood." Emma adjusted the damper, fine-tuning the fire to maintain the optimal temperature with minimal fuel. Outside, the blizzard continued, but its howling seemed more distant now. "I sometimes think about those fancy houses back east," your father said thoughtfully. "With their cast-iron radiators. I wonder if they stay as warm as our little cabin." "Probably not," your mother replied with a hint of pride. "Those city folks don't understand real insulation. They just throw more coal on the fire." Her words held truth. The Morrison cabin, despite its rustic appearance, represented a highly evolved thermal management system. The conversation shifted to other homesteaders. "The McClintock's place is drafty as a sieve," your father observed. "Henry never did learn proper chinking." "Martha said they're going through 20 logs a day just to keep above freezing," your mother added. "Won't make it through February at that rate," your father said grimly. This wasn't gossip but a serious assessment of their neighbors' survival prospects. "Should we invite them here if their wood runs out?" Emma asked, demonstrating the frontier ethic of mutual aid. Your parents exchanged a look. "We'll help if we can," your father said, "but we have to ensure our own family makes it through first." This harsh calculation, the balance between compassion and self-preservation, was another reality of frontier life. The day progressed with the storm showing no sign of abating. Inside, the family settled into winter activities. You helped your father repair a broken chair leg while he performed regular maintenance checks, testing for drafts with a candle flame and rechecking his earlier repair. "Might as well use this storm time to improve things," he declared, eyeing a spot near the door. "John, let's mix up another batch of chinking. That corner has always been problematic. Each small repair you made together significantly improved the cabin's heat retention. Your grandfather would say a well-chinked cabin is better than another cord of wood, your father remarked. Man knew what he was talking about. By late afternoon, the combination of the burning oak logs and the carefully sealed insulation systems had created a remarkably comfortable environment. Near the stove, the temperature was a luxurious 65 degrees. As dusk approached, your father prepared for the night, selecting specific pieces of wood for the evening and overnight fire. Need to maintain heat through the night without getting up every hour, he explained. The night fire was arranged differently than the daytime one. Larger pieces were positioned to burn slowly, create a deep coal bed, and provide consistent heat for the longest possible duration. If we do this right, he said, we'll still have live coals at dawn. Won't have to restart from scratch. As darkness fell, the family prepared for bed, adding layers instead of removing them. Most frontier families slept in their daytime clothes during winter, perhaps just removing the outermost layer. The sleeping arrangements were also part of the insulation strategy. The younger children shared a single bed, creating a warm microclimate with their combined body heat. Your parents performed a final check before sleep, testing the stove damper, securing the window coverings, and placing heated stones at the foot of each bed. Should be 20 below by midnight, your father predicted. Maybe 30 below by dawn. Despite this grim forecast, there was no fear in his voice. The Morrison cabin stood ready to protect its inhabitants through another brutal night. You settled into your bed, pulling the heavy quilts up to your chin. The storm raged outside, a constant reminder of the deadly environment. But instead of fear, you felt a deep appreciation for the invisible systems that kept you alive. The double walls, the crafted chinking, the layered roof, the raised floor. This was the accumulated survival knowledge of generations, the sophisticated frontier insulation systems that modern technology has largely forgotten. Sometime in the deep night, you woke to the sound of wood splintering. Your eyes snapped open. For a moment, you wondered if part of the cabin had collapsed. Thomas, your mother's urgent voice cut through the darkness. The fire's almost out. You heard your father's quick movements. The cabin had cooled significantly. Watch for nails, your father warned, his voice calm despite the emergency. I'm breaking up the chair now. You understood the splintering sound. With the fire dangerously low and the temperature dropping, your father had made a split-second decision to sacrifice furniture rather than risk losing the fire completely. It's catching, your father reported with evident relief. John, I need you up. We need more wood from the lean-to. Despite the biting cold, you slid from your quilts immediately. There was no hesitation. The cabin air hit you like a physical blow. You quickly pulled on your boots, not bothering with additional layers. Your father lit a small candle, and by its flickering light, you followed him to the door that connected to the lean-to. Ready? He asked, his hand on the latch. It'll be bitter out there. You nodded, and he pulled the door open. the blast of cold that rushed and made the cabin air seem warm by comparison. The uninsulated lean-to was at the same temperature as outside, perhaps 30 below zero. Working quickly, you and your father selected armloads of wood. Your exposed fingers began to ache almost immediately. After a minute, they started to go numb, the first warning sign of frostbite. "Enough," your father said, noticing your clumsy movements. Back inside, you closed the door firmly. Your father immediately began adding pieces to the recovering fire. "Get those hands near the stove," your mother instructed. "But not too close." You extended your hands toward the stove, keeping them about a foot away. Your mother approached with a tin of bear grease. "Let me see," she said, examining your hands in the firelight. No whiteness. Just reddened. "You'll be fine." This casual diagnosis masked the seriousness of the check. True frostbite appeared as waxy white patches, a sign of tissue death. Frontier families were experts at recognizing its earliest signs. "Rub this in," she instructed, handing you the tin of grease. "Then put these on." The heavy, rabbit fur-lined mittens were normally reserved for the worst weather, but tonight's emergency warranted their use. The greasy substance intensified the burning sensation, but as circulation returned, it began to fade. Your father had the stove burning properly now. "That was close," he muttered. "Too close." Even with all their knowledge, they had just experienced how quickly a winter situation could become dangerous. By now, everyone in the cabin was awake. "We'll need to reorganize our sleeping tonight," your father announced. "It's going to get colder still before dawn." The family's standard sleeping arrangements would need to be enhanced to counter the extreme cold. "A body heat shelter?" your mother asked. Your father nodded. "I think so. Better safe than sorry." The body heat shelter was a survival technique reserved for the most brutal cold. "John, Emma, help me move the table," your father instructed. Together, you pushed the family's main table against the wall farthest from any. Next, your father retrieved several spare quilts and, with your mother's help, began arranging them to create a makeshift tent. "William, Michael, bring your bedding," Emma directed the younger boys. "Catherine will sleep between Mama and Papa." This arrangement placed the youngest, most vulnerable family members at the core of the human heating system. The physics was simple: smaller bodies lose heat more quickly. By positioning them centrally, they benefited from the heat radiating from the larger bodies on all sides. "No gaps in the quilts," your father reminded everyone. "We want it sealed tight." The resulting structure looked primitive, but it represented sophisticated thermal engineering. The small enclosed volume, heat-reflective barriers, and multiple heat sources combined to create a microclimate that could be 20 or 30 degrees warmer than the main cabin. "I'll stay up and tend the fire," your father decided. "The rest of you get in and keep warm." Your mother shook her head firmly. "We'll take shifts. You need rest, too." They agreed to 2-hour rotations. Your father would take the first watch, followed by your mother, then you and Emma would share the final pre-dawn shift. With the main fire restored, the family began layering their clothing according to a specific strategy. "Start with the wool," your mother reminded the younger children. "Cotton kills." This stark phrase represented vital frontier knowledge. Cotton loses all insulating properties when wet. Wool, by contrast, maintains most of its value even when damp. Everyone wore a wool base layer, followed by a middle layer of flannel or more wool, and finally a heavier outer layer. "Don't forget your heads," your mother said, distributing knitted wool caps. "That's where most heat escapes." The family's socks received particular attention. Everyone put on fresh, dry wool socks. "John, check everyone's feet," your father instructed. Damp feet in cold conditions could lead to immersion foot, a condition that could progress to tissue death and gangrene with surprising speed. You moved among your siblings, checking their socks with practiced efficiency. With everyone properly layered, your mother organized the entry into the body heat shelter. There was a specific arrangement to maximize warmth. Catherine in the middle, she directed, placing the toddler in the center of the enclosed space. Boys on either side, then Emma and John on the outside. Inside the shelter, the effect was immediate. The combined body heat of 6 people created a warming effect that no stove could match for efficiency. "It's working," Emma whispered, already removing her wool cap. The younger children began to relax as warmth enveloped them. Little Catherine, nestled between her brothers, drifted back to sleep almost immediately. From your position near the edge of the shelter, you could hear your father moving about the cabin, tending the fire and checking for drafts. Occasionally, the wind outside rose to a crescendo, a final reminder of the deadly conditions beyond the cabin walls. Despite the circumstances, there was a strange comfort to the body heat shelter. Modern humans rarely experience the profound solace of shared body heat in enclosed spaces. For thousands of years, however, it was humanity's primary defense against deadly cold. "Try to sleep," your mother encouraged from her spot. "Your shift will come soon enough." Sleep came surprisingly easily in the cocoon-like warmth. When your father gently shook your shoulder for the change of watch, it felt like only minutes had passed, though his 2-hour shift was over. "Your mother's taking over now," he whispered. "I'll join you all in another 2 hours." He slid into the space your mother had vacated, his body still radiating cold from his time tending the fire. The children instinctively shifted toward this new heat source. "It's down to 40 below outside," he reported quietly. "Maybe lower. Can't really tell. The thermometer only goes to -40. This casual mention of such extreme cold, temperatures that could freeze exposed flesh in under a minute, highlighted the razor's edge separating the family from certain death. Only their sophisticated layered defenses, the insulated cabin, the carefully managed fire, the body heat shelter, and their layered clothing, stood between them and the brutal elements. Your mother's shift passed, and then it was time for you and Emma to take the final watch before dawn. You emerged from the warm shelter into the cabin's main space, which felt shockingly cold by comparison. "Stoves burning well," your mother reported as she prepared to join the others. Add wood every 30 minutes, no more than 2 pieces at a time. We need to stretch our supply. You and Emma nodded, understanding the critical nature of fire management. With the temperature so low, the margin for error had completely disappeared. Check everyone's exposed skin when you wake them, she added. Especially fingertips and noses. This kind of cold is treacherous. As your parents settled into the shelter, you and Emma took up positions near the stove. Despite being indoors, you both wore your full cold weather gear. "I'll make coffee," Emma whispered, reaching for the metal pot. "Might as well have something warm while we wait." This small luxury represented another aspect of frontier survival. Hot liquids provided internal warmth that complemented the external heat sources. As Emma prepared the coffee, you checked the cabin's defenses one final time. "Storm's still going," you reported, feeling the frigid air seeping through a small gap in the window covering. The blizzard had now continued for nearly 24 hours. Emma handed you a tin cup of steaming coffee. "Remember last winter?" she asked. "The Petersons' place?" You nodded, sipping the bitter, warming liquid. The Petersons, new to frontier life, had struggled. By February, with supplies dwindling and their poorly constructed cabin providing inadequate protection, they had been forced to slaughter their only milk cow for food. "Papa says they'll probably head back east come spring," Emma continued. "Not everyone's cut out for frontier winters." This understated assessment masked the brutal reality that frontier winter survival separated the prepared from the unprepared with deadly efficiency. The hours of your watch passed slowly. Every 30 minutes, you added precisely 2 pieces of wood to the fire, selecting and positioning each one carefully. As the first hint of dawn lightened the cabin, your father emerged from the body heat shelter. "Made it through another one," he said with simple satisfaction. "Good job maintaining the cold bed." This small praise acknowledged that properly executed survival skills carried more weight than any elaborate compliment. On the frontier, doing things right meant living to see another day. Your mother joined him, and together they began dismantling the body heat shelter. "Storm's breaking," your father announced, briefly pulling aside a window covering. The wind was dropping and the sky was lightening to the east. This news brought palpable relief. A blizzard's end meant the most acute danger had passed. As full daylight arrived, the family began its morning routine. The water bucket had a thick crust of ice that had to be broken before morning washing. 43 below on the north wall thermometer, your father reported, never seen it that cold this early in January. Yet, despite this record-breaking temperature, the Morrison family had survived the night comfortably, not by modern standards of comfort perhaps, but without danger or significant hardship. Their layered approach to cold protection, from cabin construction to fire management, had proven equal to the extreme challenge. As you helped prepare the morning meal, you realized that what your family had accomplished last night wasn't just survival. It was the application of sophisticated thermal engineering developed through generations of hard-won knowledge. This was the forgotten science of frontier winter survival, not just enduring the cold, but mastering it through integrated systems of protection. 3 days after the blizzard, the brutal cold still gripped the valley, but the skies had cleared to a brilliant, crystalline blue. The world was frozen into a deadly beauty. Your father stood in the doorway, surveying the scene. "Need to check on the neighbors," he announced. "The McClintocks haven't got enough experience for cold like this." "Is it safe?" your mother asked, her concern evident. He nodded. "The winds died completely. The cold's still dangerous, but it's manageable if we're prepared." He turned to you. "John, you're coming with me. 2 is safer than 1 in these conditions." The preparations for venturing outdoors in 40 below temperatures were elaborate and methodical. You donned layers of wool, flannel, buckskin, and a heavy canvas coat. Your feet received special attention, with 2 pairs of heavy wool socks and side rabbit fur-lined moccasins. Your hands were similarly protected with fur-lined mittens. "Face covering," your father reminded, handing you a wool scarf that had been carefully stored to ensure it was completely dry. Moisture could freeze instantly in such cold. The final preparation was food. Your mother handed each of you a small cloth bundle. "Pemmican," she explained, "and a piece of the dried apple cake. You'll need the energy. We'll head to the McClintocks first, then check on old man Patterson if there's time," your father decided. The unspoken danger hung in the air. If you weren't back by midday, something had gone wrong. You and your father stepped out into the killing cold. The sensation was immediate and shocking. Despite the protective layers, the air itself felt solid. "Keep moving," your father reminded, his voice muffled. "And watch for signs." The signs he referred to were the early indicators of frostbite or hypothermia. The McClintock homestead, normally a 20-minute walk, would take nearly twice as long in these conditions. As you walked, your father quizzed you on cold weather survival knowledge. "What's the first sign of frostbite on the face?" "White patches on the skin," you answered promptly. "And if you notice it, cover the area immediately and warm it with body heat. Never rub it." This call and response ritual reinforced critical knowledge and kept your mind sharp. When the McClintock cabin came into view, it showed worrying signs of inexperience: minimal snow banking, light smoke from the chimney, and no visible path to the woodpile. "Not good," your father muttered. "Hello, the house," your father called when you were 50 yards away. There was no response. After calling again, the door opened slightly, and a haggard-looking Henry McClintock appeared. "Thomas Morrison," he said with relief. "Thank God. Come in. Please come in." The interior of the McClintock cabin was a concerning scene. Unlike your family's ordered home, the McClintocks were huddled around their stove in desperation. "We've been burning everything we can find," Henry explained, gesturing to the stove where furniture fragments were visible. "We're down to the last of our wood. Didn't expect it to get this cold." Your father took in the situation with an experienced eye. "How's your food holding up?" "Running low," Henry admitted. "Haven't been able to get to our root cellar. Too much snow." This represented a cascade of failures in winter preparedness. "We'll dig out your cellar," your father decided, "and I'll show you some techniques for stretching your wood supply." For the next 2 hours, you and your father worked to address the critical issues. You cleared paths, showed Henry how to properly bank snow, and demonstrated more efficient fire management. Your father rearranged their furniture to create a smaller warm zone and adjusted the stove's damper. "You're wasting half your heat up the chimney," he explained. "And these gaps around your windows are like throwing wood directly into the snow." While the men worked, you noticed Martha McClintock watching intently. "How do you keep your children's feet warm at night?" she asked your father when her husband stepped outside. He explained the heated stone technique your family used. "And your windows," she continued, "they don't frost over inside like ours." He explained their double covering system. This person-to-person transmission of knowledge was often the only way inexperienced settlers could survive. By midday, the situation had improved significantly. Their wood supply would last longer, and they now possessed crucial knowledge. "We can't thank you enough," Henry said. "No need for thanks," your father replied simply. "That's how it works out here. You'll do it for someone else someday." This paying forward of survival knowledge formed a crucial social bond. As you and your father prepared to depart, Martha pressed a small bundle into your hands. "Fresh bread," she explained. "Please take it with our thanks." This offering, made from precious white flour, was an acknowledgement of community bonds that transcended mere transactions. "They'll make it now," your father said on the return journey. Another day or two, and it might have been a different story. He added that Martha's willingness to listen and learn would be their family's greatest asset. Upon returning home, your mother greeted you both with relief. "Didn't make it to Patterson's," your father explained. "The McClintocks needed more help than I anticipated." Over coffee and the bread Martha provided, he described the situation. "Should we invite them here?" your mother asked. "They're stable now with what we showed them," your father said. "Better for them to learn in their own cabin. It builds skills they'll need for the rest of winter." This assessment reflected a deeper frontier wisdom. Sometimes, immediate rescue could ultimately reduce long-term survival chances. "I told Martha about the winter community gathering," your father added. "Said we'd take them along if they wanted to go." The gathering was a monthly meeting where families traveled to a central location to share food, company, and, most importantly, knowledge. Mary Henderson's demonstrating that new wool spinning technique she learned from the Swedish family, your mother said. These gatherings served multiple crucial functions, breaking psychological isolation and fostering a collective wisdom. The following day, with temperatures a more manageable 20 below, your father declared it safe for a quick trip to check on old man Patterson. You accompanied him, bringing a parcel of fresh bread, preserved venison, and dried apples. Patterson was a seasoned frontiersman, but advancing age made self-sufficiency increasingly challenging. His cabin, when you reached it, showed all the signs of experienced winter adaptation. "Thought you might have frozen solid in that blow," the old man greeted you with gruff affection. "Been at this long enough to know what I need before winter sets in." The visit was brief but important. "Coming to the gathering at Henderson's?" your father asked. Patterson nodded. "Wouldn't miss it. Got some new ideas about snowshoe bindings I want to share, and frankly, I could use the company." This mutual exchange of knowledge and community support was the final, and perhaps most vital, survival system of the American frontier. A 20% change on this final section means rewriting approximately 840 words. I have focused on rephrasing sentences, choosing different vocabulary, and altering the structure to make the text fresh while maintaining the powerful, instructive tone and the core narrative of survival and community. Here is the rewritten version of the final part of your script. This honest admission that even the most self-sufficient frontiersman needs human connection during the long, isolated winter months highlights the psychological aspects of survival that pure technical knowledge cannot address. As you trudge homeward, your father uses the journey as another opportunity for instruction, but with a different focus than the previous day's technical lessons. "Community is as important as firewood in winter," he explains. "Humans aren't made to be completely alone. Isolation kills just as surely as the cold, just more slowly and in different ways." This wisdom, understanding that survival depends on social systems as much as technical knowledge, represents one of the most sophisticated aspects of frontier winter adaptation. The homesteaders who survived longest weren't just technically skilled, but socially connected, forming resilient networks of knowledge exchange and mutual aid. Back at your cabin, preparations begin for the upcoming community gathering. Your mother sorts preserved foods to share. Emma works on completing a pair of specially lined mittens to demonstrate her technique. Even the younger children participate by helping prepare simple gifts for other families, carved wooden toys and carefully preserved pine cones decorated with scraps of colored fabric. These preparations are more than mere social niceties. They are an investment in the knowledge economy and mutual aid systems that frontier communities developed to survive winters that would kill isolated individuals. As evening approaches and the family gathers around the stove, your father makes a surprising announcement. "I've invited the McClintocks to stay with us tomorrow night," he says. "The temperature's supposed to drop again, and I'm not confident their cabin is ready. We'll take them to the Henderson gathering the following day." Your mother nods her approval without hesitation, despite the additional strain on the family's food and sleeping arrangements. "I'll prepare the corner space for them. The children can share with ours." This decision to bring another family into your already crowded cabin demonstrates the frontier understanding that community survival sometimes required direct intervention beyond simple knowledge sharing. Henry didn't want to accept, your father continues, a hint of frustration in his voice. Martha convinced him. She understands what's at stake. Again, the gender dynamics of frontier survival emerge, with women often making the pragmatic survival decisions that male pride might otherwise prevent. As darkness falls and the nightly fire banking ritual begins, you reflect on the community dimensions of winter survival you've witnessed over the past 2 days. The technical skills your family possesses, fire management, insulation techniques, clothing systems, form only part of their survival strategy. Equally important are the social connections, knowledge exchange networks, and mutual aid systems that bind the scattered homesteaders together. This is the forgotten social science of frontier winter survival. The day of the community gathering dawns clear but brutally cold. The McClintock family arrived the previous evening, looking exhausted but relieved to be in a properly heated shelter. Your mother had reorganized the sleeping arrangements, creating space for the visitors by moving William and Michael into your bed area. Despite the crowding, the additional body heat actually made the cabin warmer during the night. As dawn light filters through the frosted window coverings, your father stands by the stove, conferring quietly with Henry McClintock. "It's 5 miles, your father explains, tracing the route on a rough, hand-drawn map. "Normally not difficult, but with this cold and children along, we need to be prepared for trouble." Henry nods. His brush with disaster has humbled him considerably. "What do you suggest?" "We'll take both sleds," your father decides. "One for supplies, one for the younger children if they can't manage the walk. And we'll bring emergency gear." This casual mention underscores another dimension of frontier survival, the constant preparation for worst-case scenarios. "John," your father calls. "Help me prepare the emergency packs." Together, you retrieve several carefully maintained leather pouches, each containing a specific category of survival tools: fire starting, shelter making, emergency food, and medical supplies. The fire starting kit is perhaps the most critical. It contains multiple ignition methods, flint and steel, a small magnifying glass, and a fire piston, supplemented with various tinder materials like char cloth and birch bark. "Check the char cloth," your father instructs. "Make sure it's completely dry." The shelter kit contains a heavy canvas tarp and coils of rope to quickly create a windbreak. The food pack holds pemmican and dried fruit. Your mother and Martha prepare food for both the journey and to share at the gathering, while Emma helps the younger children dress in their warmest clothing. "Everyone drink before we leave," your mother announces, distributing cups of hot tea. Staying hydrated helps prevent freezing. By mid-morning, the families are prepared. The sleds are packed, emergency kits secured, and everyone dressed in their most effective gear. Your father gathers everyone for a final briefing. "We stay together," he emphasizes, looking at each person directly. "No one gets more than 20 feet from the group. If you feel cold in your fingers, toes, or face, tell an adult immediately. Don't wait. If anyone needs to stop, everyone stops." These aren't just cautious instructions, but life or death protocols developed through generations of experience. "I've marked 3 emergency shelter points along the route," he continues, showing the map to the adults. "If trouble hits, we'll head for the nearest one." The emergency shelter points are natural features, a rock outcropping or a dense stand of pines, that could provide the basis for a quick shelter. "What's our signal if we get separated in a whiteout?" Henry asks, surprising everyone with this thoughtful query that shows he's beginning to think like an experienced frontiersman. Your father nods approvingly. 3 short whistle blasts. Pause. Then 2 more. He distributes small wooden whistles on leather cords. The 2 families move as a cohesive unit. Your father leads, breaking trail, while Henry pulls the supply sled. Your mother and Martha walk alongside the children, constantly monitoring them for signs of cold injury. The journey proceeds without incident for the first hour. Then, approximately halfway to the Henderson homestead, the first sign of trouble appears. The sky to the northwest, which had been clear, develops a smudged appearance along the horizon. "Weather's changing," your father announces. Not what was expected. This ability to read subtle atmospheric signs is a crucial frontier survival skill. "Should we turn back?" Henry asks. "No. Henderson's place is closer now than home, but we need to pick up the pace." Within 30 minutes, the wind picks up, carrying fine ice particles that sting exposed skin. The temperature begins dropping. "It's coming faster than I thought," your father admits. "We need to make a decision." He points toward a small rise. "There's the Carson Line shack about half a mile east. Abandoned, but still standing. Better shelter than trying to make it to the Hendersons if this turns into a full blow." The line shack is a small, crude structure built by cowboys. Though long abandoned, it offers a solid shelter if the weather deteriorates further. Henry defers to your father's judgment without hesitation. "Lead the way. We'll follow." As you move toward the shelter, your father tells a story of a previous winter adventure to keep the children calm. The story serves multiple purposes: distracting the children, maintaining morale, and subtly reinforcing survival knowledge that might soon be needed. The line shack appears just as the wind reaches concerning strength. It's a small, slumped structure, but to the wind-battered group, it represents salvation. "It'll do," your father announces after a quick check. Roof's mostly intact, and the walls block the wind. The group files into the crude shelter. It's cold and dark, but being out of the wind provides an immediate improvement. While the women attend to the children, your father and Henry begin implementing the emergency shelter protocol. "John, help me seal these wall gaps," your father instructs, pulling canvas strips from his emergency pack. You stuff fabric into the largest cracks where wind penetrates. "Now for fire," your father announces. He retrieves the fire-starting kit and begins preparing a small, carefully structured fire lay. This is a methodical process that leaves nothing to chance. He places the precious char cloth in the center, surrounded by progressively larger materials. He strikes the match carefully. The blackened material catches immediately, creating a small glow. Your father blows gently to provide oxygen. Within moments, a steadily growing fire takes shape. "We'll need more fuel soon," your father says once the fire is secure. "John, help me check what's available in here." The line shack contains some broken furniture and old leather that will burn, allowing the emergency wood supply to be conserved. As the fire grows, the shelter's temperature rises from dangerously cold to merely uncomfortable. The children are arranged closest to the heat, with adults forming a protective outer ring. Good call on the line shack, Henry tells your father quietly. We'd never have made it to the Hendersons in this. Weather's always the final decision maker out here, your father replies. While the men maintain the fire, your mother and Martha organize the food supplies for an emergency meal. We'll make a soup, your mother decides, using the cast iron pot she had packed. It'll stretch our supplies and provides hydration and warmth. The soup she creates is simple but nutritionally strategic, using dried meat, preserved vegetables, and barley. The children gradually relax as the shelter warms and food is prepared. Happy minds make warm bodies, your mother says, observing Emma's efforts to distract the children. This frontier wisdom, recognizing the connection between mental state and physical resilience, anticipated modern survival psychology. As the soup simmers, your father conducts a thorough check of each person for signs of cold injury. He pays particular attention to the extremities where frostbite typically appears first. Peter's left boot got snow inside, he discovers. We need to address this immediately. What follows is a methodical response to incipient frostbite, removing the damp sock, warming the foot gradually with indirect heat, and providing warm liquids. Your father then improvises a dry foot covering from spare clothing in the emergency pack. This incident highlights another aspect of frontier emergency protocols, the need to address small problems before they become life-threatening. A wet foot left untreated could develop frostbite within an hour. The storm continues to intensify throughout the afternoon, confirming the wisdom of seeking immediate shelter. What would have been a pleasant community gathering has transformed into a serious but manageable survival situation. As evening approaches, your father initiates the next phase of the emergency protocol, preparing for an overnight stay. We'll need to organize sleeping shifts, he explains to the adults. 2 awake at all times, 1 tending the fire, 1 monitoring everyone else. This rotation system ensures that the critical fire is never left unattended. The physical sleeping arrangement is equally strategic, with children in the center for maximum warmth and adults forming a protective perimeter. What about the Hendersons? Martha asks, suddenly concerned. Won't they worry? They'll know we either turned back or found shelter, your father assures her. No one would expect travel to continue in this weather. It's frontier common sense. This comment highlights the shared understanding that existed among experienced frontier dwellers. The Hendersons would not launch a dangerous rescue effort because they would correctly assume that you had implemented appropriate survival measures. The evening meal is carefully rationed from emergency supplies. Your mother adds a special treat, a small amount of precious sugar mixed with snow. A bit of sweetness keeps spirits up, she explains to Martha. And happy children make for a more restful emergency shelter. As full darkness falls, the line shack has been transformed from an abandoned ruin into a reasonably comfortable emergency haven. The temperature near the fire approaches 60 degrees, a remarkable achievement given the sub-zero conditions just beyond the walls. Should moderate by morning, your father predicts. These early winter blows rarely last more than 12 hours. How can you tell? Henry asks. The wind pattern started fast, peaked early. The long blizzards build more slowly. Been watching Montana winters for 15 years now. They've got patterns once you learn to see them. This knowledge, the ability to predict storm duration from subtle atmospheric cues, represents another aspect of the comprehensive survival science that frontier experience developed. The night passes in the rhythm of survival, with the fire tended continuously, sleeping bodies checked regularly, and the shelter maintained against the persistent wind. By dawn, as your father predicted, the storm begins to moderate. "We'll wait another hour to be certain," your father decides after checking conditions outside. This patience, the willingness to delay gratification and remain in a safe shelter, represents another frontier survival principle. When the group finally departs the line shack, the weather has improved dramatically. Leave the fireplace stocked, your father instructs as you prepare to close the door. Next person who needs emergency shelter should find it ready. This final act, preparing the shelter for unknown future travelers, exemplifies the frontier ethic of mutual aid across time. The journey to the Henderson homestead resonates with renewed appreciation for the margin between safety and disaster. What began as a community journey transformed into an emergency survival situation, resolved successfully through preparation, knowledge, and timely decision-making. As the Henderson cabin comes into view, you reflect on the layers of knowledge demonstrated during this brief but intense experience. From your father's weather reading to the single-match fire starting, each element represented a data point in the comprehensive science of frontier winter survival. The Henderson household welcomes your delayed group with the calm acceptance characteristic of a frontier community. Found shelter at the old Carson Line shack, your father mentions casually. Adam Henderson nods with understanding. Smart move. That was a mean little blow. This simple exchange, devoid of drama, encapsulates the frontier approach to winter survival, matter-of-fact competence. The community gathering proceeds with its original purpose, the sharing of knowledge, techniques, and social connection. As you sit near the fire, listening to the adults exchange information, you understand that you're witnessing something profound, a resilient human system for thriving in conditions that would kill individuals acting alone. The sophisticated knowledge of cabin construction, fire management, and emergency protocols combined with equally sophisticated social systems of knowledge exchange and mutual aid to create a survival capacity greater than any single family could achieve. This was the true genius of frontier winter survival. Not just the technical know-how that modern enthusiasts might try to recreate, but the integrated social systems that made such knowledge effective across generations and communities. As you drift towards sleep in your comfortable modern bed, imagine what it would be like to possess such comprehensive survival knowledge. There's something deeply satisfying about this connection to our resilient ancestors who faced winter's deadliest challenges with nothing but knowledge, preparation, and community to keep them warm through the longest nights.